Hey, office hours. Reality Capture 1.4, the professional photogrammetry software, is going to be the subject of our second hour discussion on Tuesday, May 21st. So I'm recording this video in advance so you have an opportunity to download and work with the software some before coming to the show on May 21st to ask your questions live. Again, we'll be focusing on this during the second hour, which is 11 a.m. East Coast time, 8 a.m. Pacific. So let's go through the process. I'll share a link to this page, which is the announcement about 1.4 being released. And with that release, the software is free for learning, so we can go ahead and download that without any cost. So scrolling to the bottom of the page, we have our Download Now button. And clicking that brings us to this page where we can download the launcher. Now what we're downloading here is the Epic Games Launcher, which is the main platform that Epic uses to deploy most of their tools. That includes Unreal Engine, Twinmotion, and in our case, we're interested in the Reality Capture tool. So if you already have the Epic Launcher installed, you don't need to use this button. You can just go right to the Epic Launcher. If you do use this button, you'll install and then run the launcher, and that should look something like this when you launch it for the very first time. Of course, Epic Games does make and sell games as well, so that's the first thing you see. But what we're interested in is the Unreal Engine section of this tool, and that's available here on the left-hand side. There's an Unreal Engine button. We'll click into that to go into the Unreal Engine section. Now, if you're a longtime user of Unreal Engine, it's not unusual for someone like us to go into settings and switch off the game store itself. And I just thought I'd give you a heads up that the current version of the Epic Launcher seems to have a little bit of a glitch where trying to get to Reality Capture while the game store is deactivated seems to sometimes crash the launcher. So to avoid that, make sure if you're been using this for a while and you have the games deactivated, go into settings and be sure to uncheck the hide game library. Now if you've installed this fresh for the first time, this will be off by default, but it's a good idea to make sure this is off for right now. I imagine they'll fix that later, but for now, with that hide game engine off, you'll see all of these tabs, and then the Reality Capture tab should work just fine. Now, I'm currently running Reality Capture right now, but if you go to this page for the very first time, this should be an install button. You'll click this to download the installer for Windows, and then once that installer is done, this will turn into a launch button, and you can click that to launch Reality Capture. Of course, you can launch from the Windows button as well, but in any case, this is where your install and launch button will be within the Epic Launcher. I guess it's a good thing to note at this point that Reality Capture is a PC-only toolset, so you won't be able to install this on Linux or Mac. So once you've got it installed and you can click the button to launch, we will get the Reality Capture window, and I think by default you're greeted by this help page. So there's loads of tutorials that you can click to and see. You are certainly encouraged to explore these after this initial introduction. There's lots to see, but we won't necessarily need these in this particular moment. What we're going to do is add a set of photos to our Reality Capture scene and have them processed to create a 3D model. So to get away from the help screen, I'm just going to use these buttons here in the upper left to change my view. And in this case, I'm going to do this 1+1 layout. And this gives me a 3D viewer or 2D viewer, and also essentially the 1D viewer, which is really kind of the outline of all of the different aspects of our current project. Right now, my project is empty, so there's nothing to see here right now. I'm going to load in some photos, but I did think that it would be a good idea to point out that on YouTube, the folks from Capturing Reality that developed the software do have a really good video here on how to take photos for Reality Capture. So I'll share a link for this video also in the description so that you could review that as well. I am going to use my own set of photos for this, but if you'd like, I'd recommend you use your own photos to get some practice with that. One other note to share is that in the Epic Launcher here, on the Reality Capture page, you can scroll down and go to the online learning site. Clicking here, you'll find a large library of lessons, and much of what's in here is newer and not necessarily in the help page for Reality Capture. And One other note is that in this reality capture page, if you continue to scroll to the bottom here in the launcher, we have a download samples link. So if we click on that, we're brought to a web page where we can download sample files to work with. If this is your very first time with reality capture, the small cottage lesson and download is a great place to start if you're not going to shoot your own photos. Okay, with that all covered, let's get into loading photos into reality capture. So I'll go back to reality capture, and we have two options for loading. We can load in an entire folder, and we can choose inputs to select photos individually. I'm going to click on the inputs button just so it gives me an opportunity to show you the photos that I'll be importing. In my case, I shot photos of a stone or concrete statue that was outdoors on a pretty overcast day. So this way I have a not shiny object, and there's lots of texturing detail in the stone. There is also an overcast day, so we're not getting any direct sunlight. There is a little bit of highlight and shadow, but for the most part we have fairly even lighting on this object. And so this is really an excellent candidate for reality capture. So, if you have a statue nearby that you can go photograph in your neighborhood or town, that is a good subject to go after. Just also keep in mind that you'll want to photograph this from all angles. So something that you can reach high enough to photograph the top of is certainly good. Any area of the object that you don't have viewability for is going to be basically absent from your 3D model. For this series, we'll just focus on one set of photos. So at this juncture, you don't necessarily have to worry about photographing the top and bottom of a smaller object, but that's certainly possible and something that we could talk about on the 14th. All right, so I'm just going to select one and then Control A to select all of these photos and click on Open. And this will bring all of those photos in. So I can see here in my listing that I've got 409 images. I can expand this to see them. And if I click on one, we'll get a display of that particular photo. So I can go ahead and process these. Now, the nice thing about reality capture is it does have a full automatic mode. And for a series of subject like this, it should work out really well. So I'm just going to use the Start button right here and click on that. By the way, we are in the Workflow tab, and so that's where all of these buttons are found. There's lots of different tabs, and we can explore those later. And there's also a few different modes, including 2D and 3D. But for now, we're just going to use the Start button. So clicking that, reality capture will start processing these. It will give some status information as it works through this process. And I will say that with this set of photos, I did make a little bit of a mistake in terms of my selection of photos, but I actually think it's really cool what reality capture did with this mistake. So we'll take a closer look at that when the processing is finished. I'm going to let this cook for a little while, and I will stop the recording until it's finished. One thing I will note is that when you process this after a bit of time, you'll get a prediction as to when this will be completed, along with the total elapsed seconds. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit stop, and when this is finished, we'll pick up where we left off. Okay, we're back. I think this took about 30 minutes or so to process on my computer. And, well, maybe now you can see the little mistake I made with my photos. I didn't take photos of just one statue. I took photos of two. And I did not intentionally have this set up. I didn't set this up so it would solve for both, but somehow it did. If I had intended to do this, I probably would have shot at least 3 different rows of photos across this open space between the statues. But as it happens, this statue that's across from the one that I originally was focusing on is in the background of many of the photos of this statue. And likewise, this statue is in the background of a lot of these photos. And well, reality capture figured it out. So I ended up with 2 statues solved here. And that's really the process of going from a pile of photos, in this case a little over 400, and ending up with a 3D model. So there are things that can go wrong with this. I mean, I chose this data set because I expected it to work well. I knew I had shot this a couple of years ago, but these statues should solve well given their texture and the lighting in the scene. So that worked out well. If you run into difficulty with your own experiments over these days leading up to the 14th, feel free to bring your questions to the show, and we can address them there. And hopefully I can share some additional tips and tricks on how you can attack different problems as you work through photogrammetry. So I'm looking forward to seeing you on Tuesday, May 21st for the second hour, where we'll be focusing on reality capture. Until then, have fun, office hours.